Hi, and welcome to our podcast here from World Dairy Expo 2017. This is Mark Kirk, Nutrition Research Manager. We appreciate you guys joining us. We're doing a little something different. Here we are at our booth at World Dairy Expo, and a friend of ours dropped by, John Gaser. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, glad to be here and get the week started with a bang.
Absolutely, absolutely. John, you work for Rock River Lab. Give us a little bit of an idea of your role there and who you are with Rock River Lab.
You know, there are days and weeks I wonder what I'm doing and who I am. But I'm happy to oversee the animal nutrition efforts, where we go in terms of innovation and research into the future, but also do a lot of technical support for our clientele, which range from dairy and feedlots up through consultings and then seed advisors and seed companies such as Master Choice.
Absolutely, and so John has been very integral in our part for us as Master's Choice, as we have developed a wonderful working relationship with Rock River Lab, and your staff there are just wonderful people. And testing for us on the inbred level all the way up to commercial hybrids and helping us select hybrids. And you and I, we've worked on some interesting kind of collaboration things. And one of the things that I really appreciate about you and Rock River Lab is the ability for me to come in and go, I need something that does this, and you guys, okay, well, we can do this, and this, and stuff that it's kind of outside the box and that nobody else is looking at, and you guys are so willing to jump on that. Zach and Don, so willing to do that. So tell us a little bit about what's going on at Rock River right now, some of the new stuff that you've been working on and Rock River's been working on.
Yeah, so I've been pleased to be part of the team for 5 years now, if you can believe that, which marks about 10 years since I left graduate school after studying plant breeding and genetics and animal nutrition. But really, I enjoy merging those two, and that's where our group has been spending quite a bit of time and effort recently in better understanding how seed corn, or maybe some other varieties, maybe genetics is influencing nutrition and nutritional characteristics, and then how animals respond in terms of health and performance. So we've spent a lot of time there. You mentioned some innovation and some other things, development, being on the forefront of some different things from an animal nutrition and health standpoint. That's very important, but we also want to make sure that, as Professor Shaver, Professor Combs, Professor Bill Weiss, and others have taught me in the past, that what we're developing and bringing to the forefront is practical, but then also backed by research, and that cattle actually agree with. Not that we come out with something that's crazy and cutting edge, but really we don't know how it plays in the industry.
Exactly, and that's one of the things that I really appreciate with you guys is that it's that kind of that whole big rounded picture. And you know, I can sit down with guys and we can talk theoretics, and I go, okay, so that helps me maybe select a hybrid. But then how do I translate that into what exactly is going on the farm, in the cow, and what that's really going to do for the producer? And you've been able to kind of help complete that circle, and that's something that I really, really appreciate and really enjoy, because at the end of the day, I could have the best hybrid, but if I can't tell a guy what exactly it's doing and how it's going to benefit him as a producer, then it really does no good. And so you've been able to help bridge that gap and everything. So are there any new tests this year that you're going to be bringing out? You know, last year you kind of brought out a new way of reporting or a different style of reporting. How are people responding to that?
You know, the response has been incredible. In fact, some folks have responded, this only costs so much, which maybe gives us an indication we didn't understand the market exactly. But we're continuing to build upon our comprehensive nutrition analysis, looking at how we think about animal nutrition, maybe grouping some things a little bit differently, building on our understanding of fatty acid nutrition, building on our understanding of amino acid nutrition, but really more so honing in and focusing on starch digestion with where we've been in the last year to 2 years. I think we've come a long way as an industry as a whole, and in research there's still a long ways we have to go in understanding rumen digestion and metabolism and interactions within the dairy cattle, but trying to package some of the big picture concepts and then put them into a usable format so we can make decisions, and then cattle are in agreement with what we're doing, making sure we have that benchmark and foundation, and then bringing that out to the industry.
Definitely. So as far as I know, you are the only lab that is giving a 16-hour, a 7-hour, a 3-hour, and a 0-hour starch digestion. Am I correct at that?
To my knowledge at this point, that's correct. And so one thing that, as we better understand rumen digestion and metabolism in dairy cows and feedlot cattle, it's not a uniform process. It's not linear either.
Right.
In that, I make an analogy often to a campfire. It's similar to how a campfire gets started maybe a little bit slowly with some kindling, and then as the energy grows, it sort of just takes off until all the wood's burned out, and then it plateaus, and then we're done. We've captured all the energy. Rumen digestion with any nutrient, for that matter, is very similar. The rumen bacteria, and the cow has to eat the food, and then the rumen bacteria have to attach to the feed, and that takes a little bit of time. There's a little bit of time when that interaction starts happening, but once those rumen bacteria and those bugs are grabbed onto and attached and digesting that feed, then they just take off in an exponential fashion, but then they plateau somewhere as well.
Yeah.
So our aim is to understand that curvilinear digestion process, but then also be able to translate and package that into useful information, because it's very complex to understand those curves.
It is very complex to understand those curves, and then understand how those curves impact milk production or meat production, or however else whatever else we're going to look at there. And that's kind of where I think the next step is all right. So we've got these. So how does this really how does this really impact milk production? Because even the rationing software doesn't account for any of that.
There's a lot of interaction. So the nutrition software that's out there, that developed by the National Research Council, researchers at Cornell University, we're starting to capture and try and bring some of that in with digestion rates, other complex ideas and philosophies, but then integrating that back into, hey, how are cattle going to respond when we bring this feed into the diet and combine it with some other things? So, yeah, we do have a long ways to go, but we're getting closer.
But we are. I think, so I've been dealing with this for about 6 years now, and really the growth that we've seen in the industry and the exposure to these things in the industry has definitely increased over the last 6 years.
At some level, it's outpacing probably what the practical nutritionist is grasping in some levels.
Absolutely. No, I would definitely agree. I definitely agree. So silage samples are starting to roll in from across the country.
Yeah.
What are you seeing? Are you seeing any trends within those silage samples? Is fiber digestibility good, bad? Is it better in some places? What kind of trends are you seeing with the silage samples?
Understanding that corn made for silage is becoming an increasingly valuable proposition for the dairy farms, as corn silage in diets is comprising, in many cases, 60 to 70, if not 100% of forage on dairies and feedlots. We're focusing really hard there and trying to understand not only the corn, but then focusing in on the carbohydrates, the fiber, the starch. How are cattle going to respond to this year's crop as it's coming off? So we've been seeing samples harvested from Florida in the south and Texas up through now in the upper Midwest. We're going heavy. It's a little bit later this year than maybe would have been ideal because of lack of heat units.
Sure.
But I think that might have an impact, or have had an impact, on what we're seeing now with fiber digestibility, which is, it seems like the fiber carries a little bit more energy in it this year relative to last year. Another thing that we're seeing this year is that the crop appears to maybe be a little bit cleaner than it was last year.
Okay, not as much toxins and
maybe less fungal contamination, and then mycotoxin load coming on with maybe less ear rot, less stalk rot. It just seems, and I'll reference Professor Damon Smith, a colleague of mine at the University of Wisconsin, who I appreciate learning from. He's let me know that they're not seeing as much ear and stalk rot in many cases this year, not as much fungal contamination. So my hope is that we have a higher nutritional value in the forage, and it's also cleaner, meaning that it's not going to rob cattle of health as well.
Definitely. So we've seen some better fiber digestibility. We've seen cleaner. What are we seeing on starch digestibility? Have you looked at that yet?
So starch digestibility is influenced by a number of things. The growing environment being a very strong one. I don't know that I fully have my arms wrapped around that, but genetics, I'm convinced, is a pretty strong player.
Yep.
And I think over time that'll play itself out, but then the extent of fermentation as well. So as we take a crop off the field and it's unfermented or relatively fresh, we're seeing rumen starch digestibility plummet from what would have been, say, 80% digestible grain on average, or corn silage on average with a fully fermented crop.
Yep.
We're seeing that plummet down to probably 55 to 60% on average.
Is that
now
above or below where we were at last year pulling crop off?
At this point, we're kind of in the middle of the harvest through the upper Midwest, so I wouldn't be able to give you an idea exactly where we sit relative to last year.
Definitely. Okay, makes sense.
Good question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, So your new comprehensive nutritional analysis that you've got out you've been looking at that and referencing that before. How many guys are looking at the amino acid profile?
You know, that's a good question. And so our focus as nutritionists and in the nutrition industry, when looking to impact the dairy's bottom line first and foremost, it starts with what's the dairy getting paid for. And so right now, butterfat is actually upwards of $3 a pound,
right.
And then milk protein is considerably less than that. So that's flip-flopped relative to where we were several years back. In that now the dairies are getting paid much more for butterfat than they are for milk protein. So there are probably, I would say, 50%, maybe 40 to 60% of consulting nutritionists and dairies that are looking at and focusing on amino acid nutrition. But the focus more recently has turned over to butterfat,
right,
in terms of strategies that we can implement to improve rumen health or potentially feed the animal a little bit differently from a fatty acid nutrition standpoint, and
so
produce more butterfat.
For a producer who's out there right now, we've been talking kind of theoretical and big picture. For a producer right now who is maybe looking to increase butterfat, all right, can you give three maybe areas that he needs to look at in the ration to be able to increase that? You know, maybe 3 tips or something along those lines.
Absolutely.
If he wants to increase butterfat.
Yeah. So butterfat production, or butterfat depression, as it's sometimes called in situations where maybe the cows aren't producing as much butterfat as would be ideal. It's a really complex process. It starts in the rumen and then carries over to the mammary gland. So I reference Professor Adam Locke, who's taught me a great deal at Michigan State University, and we've done some work together, and I'll continue to learn from him. I've been focusing more on fatty acid nutrition, but in terms of execution and implementation on farm of nutrition, first it comes down to consistency. Delivering a consistent diet to that dairy cow every day, because surges, whether she has too little feed or too much feed, might cause slug feeding or things like that can disrupt rumen consistency. And then in terms of once that feed is consumed and hopefully consistently delivered, there are interactions within the rumen, primarily starch digestion, maybe other nutrient metabolism along with that, fiber digestion, and then the clean feed aspect has been a big one as well. We need the rumen digesting bacteria and fungi and protozoa. We need them to be working in synchrony to really break down the total diet and not giving us some of the maybe detrimental trans 10 cis 12 fatty acids that we know can really wipe out butterfat. So we're getting a little scientific in terms of some of the fatty acids, but that's the level we're taking things. So we've been focusing on total diet and corn silage and grain starch digestion, and then also looking at clean feed as well.
Good deal. So as a guy is working towards those things, how do you see the best way for him to begin to start achieving those goals?
That's a great question. How do we get to where we want to be? And for me as a consultant or as an advisor, it would be first understanding what are the challenges, what are the bottlenecks in front of us. Do we have one? Do we have maybe 2 things on our way? And then, but more importantly to that, what's the primary thing we need to work towards and alleviate? So we may have the best diet prescribed to us on paper by the nutritionist, but if we're not executing, if we're not carrying that out, if we're missing dry matters, our feeding schedules are all over the board. Maybe it's 10 a.m. one day, maybe it's 12 p.m. the next day. Are those cows consistently fed? Is there enough feed there? Is there too much feed? I would first work to understand, of the areas we talked about, what is, and work with your nutritionist and your veterinarian, what is the number one thing we should focus on, and prioritize then the opportunities that we see for the dairy in terms of
and then get those fixed and snowball to the next one, and
then knock things down. Don't try and tackle everything at once.
No, I think that's one of the biggest problems that we see a lot of times is we see a guy who has several problems and he tries to do it all at once, and then he just kind of gets overwhelmed is a great, or disillusioned, and he just kind of throws his hands up and say, well, I can't do it. But tackling each one of those things, identifying, and I think that's probably, we got to identify where our problem is. And sometimes that's difficult. And sometimes that means we got to have hard conversations with the boys who are feeding, or whoever's supposed to be feeding, or what's going on there, and doing that, or hard conversations with the guys who are harvesting. I need this harvested at this time point to get the most nutrition out of this. And so there's a lot of those, sometimes some very hard conversations, and especially like on a family-run dairy.
And it comes back to precision, and it comes to orchestrating and working as a team. And communication is hard, but team meetings are essential, and just working towards whether it's butterfat, whether it's better health and performance, and also just don't take for granted where you're at, or don't set the bar too low, because with $15 to $16 base prices forecast in the future and margins, if you look out 6 or 8 months, aren't forecasted to be too good, if not negative. We need to do everything we can to find another 5, 10, 15 cents per cow per day, whether it be with improved performance nutritionally, maybe better butterfat. I'm not sure.
Definitely. So, John, I appreciate you stopping by. I appreciate you talking through some of these. But I have a couple more questions for you, and we'll switch gears a little bit here, okay? So, so we know that you are a Badger.
Absolutely.
So how are the Badgers doing this year?
Which Badgers? Our football
the
team,
the football
hockey
Badgers.
team,
I mean, come on, we're right in the middle of October. Let's talk.
Yeah, so
we're talking football.
I'm very proud that our Wisconsin Badgers are holding a top 10 ranking at the moment, heading into Nebraska this weekend with what we anticipate to be a hard-fought contest in Lincoln.
Okay.
I feel bad for those folks down in Nebraska that may be on the end of what I hope to be a whipping this weekend. But the Badgers are looking good. They appear to be a strong second-half team in each of their games.
Okay.
They've performed well maybe in the first half of some games, but have really put it on strong in the second half. So a lot of potential there.
Definitely. So I mean, we're going to carry this through a little bit, because I know how diplomatic you try to be at times with this. All right, and so I want to know what is your gut feeling about where they're going to end up at the end of the year.
I would love to see the Badgers in the playoff this year in that Final Four. I think that might be a stretch. So I'm projecting a New Year's Day bowl for the Badgers at this point, with my expert opinion. So we're talking nutrition and now translating into sports.
Well, I mean, so obviously, you are the expert there, right? And
self-proclaimed.
And even when I look at it according to my level of expertise, you're in nutrition, you're several steps ahead of me, and then in sports, light years, right? You know what I mean? Like light years ahead of.
Well,
of
my
me.
friend, I'll just say and acknowledge that I'm going to continue to work hard to uphold your expectations and even do better at that in the future.
Awesome, John. We appreciate you stopping by here at our booth here at the World Dairy Expo. Appreciate your talking to us and spending your valuable time. Appreciate you as a person and your friendship. And so
that feeling is mutual, and I want to acknowledge I appreciate the values that you and your group hold as well, in terms of, from what I've seen, looking to benefit the dairy and the feedlot industry. And so I appreciate that, and I know we're going to work hard to continue with those values in mind.
Absolutely. No, sounds good. Tell Katie and the kids hi when you get home tonight.
Absolutely.
All right, take care.
Same to Mandy.